And thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. I'm going to share my screen. I've got it so that you'll be able to hear. Uh, okay. And I'm assuming everybody can see my screen and hear me okay. If not, please speak up. So I'm with the Department of Behavioral Health Developmental Services, as was said, and my main role is to work on problem gambling prevention for the state. But I also help to oversee a little bit of the treatment and recovery work as well in coordination with others in the department. So I've lost the screen where I can see how many people are on here now, but this may or may not work out very well. We'll have to see because with just a few of us, this will be anonymous, but hopefully people will be able to get on and show, see what's here and do a little vote. If you're able on your computers or your cell phone, if you have one, go to this menti.com and use this code, or you could take a shot of this and then just kind of select, in the past 6 months, if you've gambled. Um, and if people can do that, it looks like some people have answered already. And so far, okay. It looks like we're just not a risk-taking group here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do then is go to the next one and let's answer this. So remember this, 100% of us have not gambled in the past 6 months. Now, hopefully people can see this next screen and are able to move to the next screen in their piece and just answer, did anybody play the lottery or scratch tickets, pull tabs, megabucks, bingo, casinos, any of these at all? Um, play video games and bet on video games. Well, that's an actual match. I've never ever had this happen before. You guys are a good group and obviously know what gambling is. So let's see, we have a chat here. Oh, I don't have video on my desktop, but I'm really okay. So usually what ends up happening is people will say that no, they haven't gambled in the past 6 months. But then you go ask them this question and the different types of things. They don't necessarily think of any of these things as gambling. And usually you'd end up with a few numbers here, showing that there was actual gambling. So this next one is just defining what gambling actually is. And I think this group pretty much knows it because you obviously were able to select correctly what it is. But basically it's betting or wagering something of value. Usually it's money, but not necessarily. And it's dependent upon whether or not there is some chance. It doesn't have to be all based on chance. So when you hear things like skill machines, a lot of those skill machines have chance as part of it. And it's where the outcome's unknown. You don't know for sure. You don't know 100% for sure what's going to happen. That's the definition of gambling. So you're betting on a chance to win something, usually of greater value, and you don't know what the outcome will be. When we talk about gaming, and lots of times you'll hear the word gambling and gaming exchanged the same. That was something that kind of started with the gambling industry because gaming is less stigmatized word than gambling. And people are playing games. It's just that they're gambling while they're playing the games. So a gaming disorder would be like a video game addiction. And that's normally what we're talking about when we're talking about gaming disorder versus a gambling disorder. So that's where the difference really kind of lies. But you do see these used interchangeably. So here's how gambling came about within the state of Virginia. Back in 1973, the very first type of gambling occurred, and that's charitable gaming. Charitable gaming are things like the raffles, or if you're a member of an Elks or Moose, one of the animal clubs, and you go in there and you see some of these machines, or they're raising money through different lotteries or raffles, or they may have bingo there, or you go to the church and there's bingo. That's part of charitable gaming. And that first occurred back in 1973. The lottery was created 14 years later, and the very first ticket was sold in 1988. So it was created in 1987 with the first ticket selling in 1988. In 1989, so we started becoming, okay, well, we've got lottery now. Well, how about some, wagered horse racing? Can we start allowing people to bet on that? So 1989, they opened that up to start allowing horse racing. Then there was this long stagnant period. And in 2018, a lot occurred. They passed the law to allow historical horse racing in Virginia. And what historical horse racing is would be if you've ever been into a Rosie's, or now there's the Rose, Colonial Downs, they have these machines. That's called historical horse racing. You might see it be known as parimutuel betting. That same thing. It's based on past horse races, but the machines basically look like slot machines. So they kind of, I still kind of consider them slot machines. Also in 2018, a federal law, which was called PASPA, was overturned, and that allowed states to decide whether or not they wanted to offer gambling in their states, like the sports betting in their states. Virginia, the following year, had legislation, and in 2020, sports betting passed, and casinos, the allowance of up to 5 casinos was passed in the state. And iLottery. iLottery is, you can actually play the lottery, the scratch tickets, that type of thing online if you went onto their site. So that passed as well. But the first sports betting operator, even though it passed in 2020, the sports betting operator, first one that went live, was in January of 2021, because it takes a little while to get this set up and get regulations in order. The very first casino opened in Bristol in July of 2022, and we have 3 full-fledged casinos now in the state of Virginia, and that's in Bristol, Danville, and Portsmouth. The things that you see called Rosie's or the Rose, those are not casinos because they don't have all the other pieces that go with a casino. They're what we would call racinos. And they don't have poker and roulette and that type of thing. So for the age, how old you need to be to gamble in the state? Well, for things like sports betting and casino games, going into Rosie's or Colonial Downs to bet on the electronic games that are there, the electronic pull tab machines in the cherry. So if you're in some Elks and Moose clubs, lodges, they have these electronic machines which are like pull tabs, like a paper pull tab, but it's not paper, it's all on a machine. So you're supposed to be 21 or older to play those. They just passed a bill. It's dependent upon the governor signing off on it, but it looks like he probably will. So if he does, effective July 1 of 2025 this year, fantasy sports will also be 21 and over, and Texas Hold'em poker will also be 21 and over. Poker that's in the casinos was already 21 and over, but Texas Hold'em poker, which is done out in the communities, was not. It was 18 and over. The one caveat with that for the fantasy sports, because people already have accounts with these online fantasy sports businesses, that those who are between the ages of 18 and 21 now, if, come July 1, they've already have an account with a company, they can continue to play. So it's almost like being grandfathered in, kind of like they did with alcohol many years ago. For the other things, there's lottery, raffles, scratch cards, scratch tickets, and the live horse racing. That's where you're going and you're actually there doing the live horse racing. People are 18 and over for that. Bingo is 18 and over as well. But if you have a parent or an adult, you could be 13 years old and play bingo as long as they're with you. So when we look at gambling as a problem, gambling itself is not a problem. It's got a lot of, you can say to somebody, oh, well, you just gambled. And they'll be like, oh, no, I didn't gamble. But gambling itself is not necessarily a problem. Many people can do it without having issues. But you've got, they say around 2 to 3% of the population that can have disordered gambling. And then you've got another significant portion, and that could be another 5-6% on top of that, who can suffer problems, not necessarily have the diagnoses of disordered gambling. And certain age groups have it even higher. They say your 18 to 25-year-old age group could be, 10 to 15% of them having problems or disordered gambling. But what problem gambling is, some of the signs and symptoms can include constantly thinking about gambling or your next gamble. A person feels they need to gamble, or they need to gamble more money, or more often to get the feeling they once had. They may try to chase their losses as well to try to earn back what they lost. They might feel anxious if they can't gamble. They're spending more time or money than intended, gambling more than they can afford to lose. That's when you start seeing the problems. And there's several different points that they would look for before a person is diagnosed with in the DSM-5 manual with a gambling disorder. And also some other signs or symptoms that people may notice is, even though others might say to them, hey, you shouldn't be gambling. You're spending a lot of money. You're always there every, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. And even though they're getting some concern from people, they just kind of ignore it and they keep doing what they were doing. Those are other samples or signs of gambling. And gambling occurs on a continuum. As I said, most people can gamble and not suffer problems, right? So they're in this non-gamblers section. They're the non-gamblers. And you've got your recreational gamblers, and they're just doing it, having fun. They're able to go maybe, for an hour or so and say to themselves, okay, I'm not going to bet any more than $20 and stick with it. And, they're just there with some friends and having fun. But then other people, they may have certain risk factors that put them at a little bit higher risk for problem gambling. So they might start betting more money than they had planned, or they're staying there longer, or they're there by themselves instead of going with their friends or meeting their friends. They may think that, if they just bet a little bit more, they'll be able to win more. So they've got this illusion of control. And it keeps moving on up the continuum to whether there's impaired control or they're experiencing some negative consequences. Some of their relationships with their family and friends may start to be impacted. And as they get into the more severe problem gambling, they've sustained that impaired control for quite some time. They're experiencing really big, significant negative consequences with it. It could be, some foreclosures. It could be a lot of people contacting them about missing payments for things. They're having these recurring problems over time. And people can also kind of move back and forth. They may suffer bad problems and something may happen where they're not able to gamble and they start to, get a bit better. And then maybe something else happens and they end up gambling again. And so, it could be a vicious type of cycle as well, moving up and down the continuum. When it comes to our brain, the way how a lot of people think is they think, well, gambling can't be an addiction. It doesn't make any sense, right? You're not putting anything into your body. And while you're not ingesting through your mouth or your nose or your veins or, a drug into your system, what you are is through your eyes, through your hearing, through, the sounds, the smells, you're beginning to change sort of the chemistry of your brain and the dopamine that is released. And so, you have all these issues that begin and you're already feeling maybe not so well about something. And this makes you feel good because you're getting that little hit of dopamine and you want to keep feeling that. So here's a little video which I find useful in sort of explaining how gambling can impact our brain. And if anybody can't hear this, please let me know.
Gambling. At first, it can feel a bit like getting behind the wheel of a new car. You're excited, confident, and in control. When you win, you feel on top of the world. There's nothing to worry about. So what's happening in your brain when you're gambling? The reward hub in your brain is like the gas pedal in your car. It gives the go signal to move towards what you want. The top-down control network is like the brakes in your car. It gives a signal to slow down or stop what you're doing. How you doing? Everything good? Addiction is like a communication problem between these gas and brake pedals. You keep pressing on the gas, but when it's time to stop, the brakes might not work. By the time you realize that gambling has become a problem, it can be difficult to stop. Gambling is now a habit. Habits are formed when brain activity shifts away from conscious control. You might feel like you're on autopilot. Once habit has taken over, you become very aware of gambling cues and triggers. Gambling isn't as fun, but you continue to do it to escape those uncomfortable urges caused by those triggers. As the consequences of your gambling get worse, so does your mood. At first, gambling has a positive effect on your mood, but in addiction, your natural mood set point drops. Over time, gambling becomes less pleasurable, and your set point lowers, even when you aren't gambling. It can lead to depression. Hey, are you worried about your gambling? This helped me, and it might help you.
So that was a project that was developed in Canada, and they use that with their helpline information. But, the link is available online for people to view anytime that they want to. So, please, I'll have this shared through a file with Northwest CSB that they can post, and in case you want to access that. So let's look at some of the risk factors. What factors increase our risk of suffering problems from gambling, and what factors does gambling or gambling problems increase your risk for? So is it the chicken or the egg? And it can be both. Some of the youth risk factors that put them at risk for developing gambling problems. We all know when we were younger, we're very impulsive, right? We're the parts of our brain that help to control our behaviors hasn't quite developed. So you've got that impulsivity is a big risk factor, that poor impulse control. You've got delinquency and persistent problem behaviors that often occur. You've got favorable attitudes to problem gambling that may occur for some people. If a person has an early win, they think, oh, well, this is easy. I can make money on this, and I'm going to keep doing this. If they have, if they're into sensation or risk-taking behaviors, you may notice that gambling would be a natural piece to try to move towards. They may have depression, some suicidal ideation, poor coping skills, low self-esteem, early childhood traumas. These are all part of our individual risks. But some of these can also play out into the community and family as well. With our family history of addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or gambling itself, a lack of parent knowledge about what some of the risks may be, family attitudes and involvement in the gambling activity, lack of parental objection to gambling, just very similar to like with alcohol or drugs. If the parent doesn't really object or say out loud to them that they object to it, or if they're modeling that they're doing it as well, that can also increase their risk. And then if their peers are gambling, because we know peers have a very strong impact on other youth. On our community level risk factors, you've got the accessibility of gambling, lack of community awareness of the problem. Again, a lot of people thinking that it can't be a problem. You've got social acceptance of it, right? People don't say anything, and you also don't see it. You don't necessarily see the problems like if you saw somebody drunk walking down the sidewalk. You also have the media that may portray it in TV shows as, not being too different, nothing being too bad, or it happening one time to a person and then they're fine. And then there's tons and tons, as we know, TV ads, whether you're watching a sports show or not, there's lots of TV ads around gambling. Some of the adult risk factors that put, adults at risk for developing these gambling problems is very similar to that of youth. You've got your access and availability of gambling. The easier something is to access, the more likely is people are to participate. And I once gave, I was saying to my sister one time, and I said, about access and availability being an issue. And she's like, well, I don't believe that. And it just so happened later on that day, we were in the grocery store and we're coming to the checkout line. And next to the checkout line, there were some really good, looking pastries and sweets and stuff. And she picks up, she goes, oh, I wish they wouldn't put these here because I just can't walk by them without using it. And I said, bingo, you just proved my point about access and availability. If it wasn't there, you would have gone through the checkout line and not bothered to pick that up. But being that it was there, you picked it up. That's part of what access and availability is. The easier you make it for somebody, the more likely they are to participate. And then it makes it also become more of a norm in the community. Again, with youth, just like with youth, you've got, if there's a big early win, if peer groups that you're involved with are gambling, that also increases a person's risk. If they have poor social support systems or are involved in the criminal justice systems, that is one of the highest risk factors out there. People with antisocial personalities or mood disorders, and again, that impulsivity, just like with youth, you can have that as an adult as well. If you have lack of knowledge about gambling, or it's socially acceptable in your neighborhood. If there's been childhood trauma like ACEs, the more ACEs somebody has, the more likely they are to suffer a gambling problem. And again, if there's a family history of it. So some of the data that I've found interesting is looking at our ACEs, and I believe most people on this know what ACEs are. As I said earlier, more ACEs equals more gambling. So people who never gambled, who had one or more ACE, right, 66%, versus no ACEs of 28%. If they gambled once or twice, 51% of them had at least one ACE. If they gambled weekly, 60% had one or more ACE. If they gambled daily, 70% had one or more ACE. And that's in the 2024. The 2022, actually, it ended up looking almost like a straight line. It was around 40, I think around 48% who had never gambled also only had one or more ACEs. So, of course, this is the 2024 data, which has varied some, but again, both tend to show this upward line. The more frequently someone gambles, the more ACEs they tend to have. And when I say ACEs, just in case somebody doesn't know, it's these traumatic or negative events that occur prior to the age of 18. These are things like violence or abuse, neglect, or even if you're witnessing violence in the home or the community, or losing a family member to death, jail, or through divorce. And while many people suffer negative events in childhood, some suffer multiple events and don't have a positive force influencing them to counterbalance that. One of the issues with gambling problems is you're at higher risk for suicidality, for both attempts and completions as well. Even if somebody had, let's say they didn't have a gambling problem, but they had an alcohol or drug problem. Excuse me. Sorry. They are not as high of a risk as a person who has a gambling disorder, with 31% showing a suicide ideation, which is 1 in 5 or 6 attempting suicide as well. The 2021 Virginia Youth High School Survey that is done through the schools, most schools in the state, it showed that those who gambled in the past year were 12.8% more likely to have said they seriously considered suicide in the past year than those who said they did not gamble. So that's, that's just in your high school, not even once they tend to get into more severe gambling issues as they age. Our national vital statistics data, which is our mortality data, that between 2018 and 2020 in Virginia, that about 9% to 12% of the suicide deaths noted circumstances of financial problems. And I just recently received 2021 and 2022. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was closer to 15% on those years, which would kind of make sense considering those are also the years that the availability of gambling really dramatically increased, right? Because we're all walking around with it in our pockets on our phones if we chose to use them. So also, one of the things that puts people at higher risk is the more types of gambling. So, let's say somebody does scratch tickets and bingo, and they sports bet, and they play fantasy sports, and they go to the casinos and do slot machines, right? So those are what I just named are 5 different types of gambling. The more types of gambling a person does, the more likely they are to self-harm. And you particularly see that bump start to go up at 5 or 6. This is from the 2024 young adult survey data. So that's data on those 18 to 25. In the 2022 data, we were seeing the rates really increase from 4 or more. So anywhere 4 or 5 or more, just think the more different types a person does, the more likely they are to consider self-harm or suicide. And that's for people who gambled in the past 30 days. So if we want to know who's gambling and what are they playing, we also surveyed both underage in the Virginia Youth Risk Survey, and we have the young adult survey data as well. So this question we put out there was, during the past 12 months, how many times have they gambled on a sports team or playing cards or a dice game, or they played the state lottery game, gambled on the internet, bet on a game of personal skill, such as pool or a video game. And what we found is that 16 to 17-year-old age group tended to have the higher rates of those who said that they had gambled. And that was in the 2023. The 2021 data was the same. It showed that same age group as being higher. Each age group for males increased from 12 to 30%, with the, as I said, the 16 to 17-year-olds increasing at the higher rates. And this is the young adult gambling rates increased by 37% from those 18 and over, and 120% from the 2021 youth survey. So we've had some big increases since it's become legal here. With this data, over a third of the young adults participated in a gambling activity in the past 30 days. Of those that did gamble, 66% bought lottery tickets and 61% bet on sports. 15% of those that gambled in the past 30 days said it often interfered with their regular activities. So that would be things like their schoolwork or socializing, going to work, not just schoolwork, but going to work if they work a part-time job somewhere. And region 1, when I looked at that data, it's very similar rates to what you see here. If you also take a look at this on the right-hand side where it says they, share the share of the respondents who agree with the following statements. So not only can gambling and gaming itself be a problem, but you have, almost 10% who use tobacco more, or they drink more when they game or gamble. So that puts them at other risks. Then you have things that can be signs for potential problem. That would be, they say that gaming and gambling have negatively affected their finances. So that's 15% of them that have said that. 15% of them said that it often interfered with their regular activities. 13% said they spend a lot of time during the day thinking about gaming and gambling. So those three in particular can be signs for possible problems with gambling. But then you've got 21% that say gaming and gambling helps them build or maintain social connections and friendships. So hopefully what we don't know is, are they maintaining friendships that are good for them or not good for them? We can't say for certain with that data. With the young adult survey, you can see that while young adult women that gambled just once or twice in the prior 30 days was similar to men's rates, when you ask if they gambled weekly or daily, though, male rates greatly surpassed that of the females, with 3 to 4 times more males gambling more often than females. If we compare 18 to 25-year-olds who are in college to those who are not in college, the rates are pretty similar. Although those not in college have slightly higher rates of weekly or less frequent gambling than those currently in college. In the 18 to 25-year-old age group population, not only are we seeing overall higher rates of gambling in the Black and African American young adults, this population is gambling more frequently. And if they're gambling more frequently, that again puts them at higher risk of having gambling problems. This is at 2 to 3 times higher than white young adults, and 2.5 to 10 times higher than Asian young adults, which is kind of interesting because they say that gambling addiction rates are quite high in Asian nations. Gambling more frequently increases the risk that a person may become addicted to and or suffer problems from gambling, whether that's financial problems, relationship problems, there's all different kinds of problems. More data from the young adult survey is that with lottery purchases, such as Powerball, scratch tickets, those are the most common types. They don't tend to have as high of a risk of causing problems for people as some of the other forms of gambling, but they could still, they're what you would call a lower risk type of gambling. With those 21 and over having slightly higher rates than those aged 18 to 20. So, it's legal 18 and above, but typically those 21 and over have higher rates of this play than those under 21 for a lot of the things, which, most of the gambling is not legal until they're 21. And while most people who gamble do it infrequently, the data did show that 10% of Virginians 18 to 25 years of age, at least a couple times a week, gamble, and 3% do so daily. So the rates are similar for those living in Region 1 as well as what you see here on the 2024 survey. So is there help? What can you do if you or someone you know thinks that they have a gambling problem? And what if you see illegal gambling? What do you do? And what's the self-exclusion problem? Well, it's not a problem. The self-exclusion is something that people can do if they think they have a problem. You can't do it for somebody else. You can't sign somebody else for this. They have to sign up themselves because they have to sign up giving their ID and information. So what this program is, it allows people to exclude themselves from being able to gamble in Virginia for 2 years or 5 years or for life. And it's also supposed to ensure that the legal gambling operators in Virginia do not email, they don't text, they don't mail snail mail promotions to the person for the time frame that they're signed up. So when you sign up for one of these, a 2-year or 5-year lifetime, it signs you up across the board for all types of gambling in Virginia. But with that said, one of the things that it doesn't help much with is, so let's say if you go in and you want to get a lottery ticket or a scratch ticket at any of these convenience stores, they don't ID you, and so it's not checked with, are you allowed to be purchasing this? But when you go in to cash in your ticket, for your winnings, and you have to show an ID, then it catches you, so you're out the money. So, and if you're caught turning in a ticket for somebody who is on the self-exclusion, you can be in trouble as well. It also is not being used like it is supposed to be used at some of these charitable gaming sites, where, the Elks and Moose Lodge, they don't necessarily have access to that. So they're trying to work on all that to make sure that those people there also have access and can stop this or have it done through the machines. And then, of course, with some of the skill games that are illegal, but in some stores, that they're not being excluded from there. But for the legal forums that are doing what they should, when you sign up, and it's across the board, as I said, such as lottery, casinos, sports betting, charitable gaming, some forms. In the lottery, you can only put yourself on and not someone else. What we have right now in the state, or at least as of December of 2024, is there were 1,589 people on that self-exclusion list. The 5-year tends to be the highest number that people sign up for. Overall, about 74% of the people that sign up are male and 26% are female. That's been fairly similar for quite a while now. It did have a little bit higher bump, with the sports betting that came on board, where males rose a little bit higher than what they had been. But the 5 years where the majority of the people sign up for. And then after 5 years or 2 years, you would need to re-sign up yourself. You can also, some places have, like if you were to go into Rosie's or the casino in Rivers, and I believe DraftKings, the sports betting, you can actually sign up for their own. If let's say you're somebody that you live in that area and you're like, okay, I don't necessarily have a problem with all forms of gambling, but I want to make sure I'm not able to go into this one, into this location that's near me. You can sign up through just theirs, and they have shorter venues. But if you want to sign up for the state one, you do that in person there or through the app, and that will go through to the Virginia Lottery that manages that whole system. If you have an issue with gambling, or someone has an issue, they can call either the state helpline number, which is the 888-532-3500, or they can call the national number, which is 800-GAMBLER. Both are answered by the same group, and they'll both come through our state. The only issue with the 1-800-GAMBLER, if you've got, like I've got an out-of-state area code, I may be accidentally routed to the state where my area code aligns with before getting it being pushed back to Virginia's. If you call the 1-800-GAMBLER, because they haven't quite worked out that piece yet, where it's going to be based on geocoding versus the area code that you're calling from. But both will bring you to the Virginia line, and they can provide all sorts of helpful information to you. We also provide them funding so that if a person doesn't have any insurance, or they have insurance, but it will only cover a small portion of gambling treatment gambling addiction treatment, or maybe you're not quite at the level where you want gambling addiction treatment, but you need some recovery services to help you along the way. We provide funding so that it will help cover co-pays, or again, if there's no insurance, cover the full amount of the treatment or recovery services for up to a year for a person. And if you happen to see illegal gambling, like if you're in one of these stores and they've got the skill games going on, you can call the gaming tip line, which is through the Virginia State Police, or you can report it online, and you can do this all anonymously if you're, worried about something. And then they'll work with local police to try to investigate it. And that is all I have. But I'd like to know if you have any questions. If anybody has questions or about any of the new legislation, or how you might become involved in doing some prevention work, or even if you're involved in the treatment and recovery, if you want to know how to become part of that treatment and recovery network.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ann. A couple of questions did come in, and if there are any others, you guys can speak up or put your questions in the chat box. First of all, I just want to thank you for the presentation, and especially the linking that you did between substance use and mental health, suicide, and problem gambling. Many of the coalitions that we work with in our service area, their primary focus is on substance use, preventing that, with a secondary attention to mental health and suicide. And so it's important to understand that this plays a role and there is a link with those things that we do. So thank you for that. There was a question specifically regarding the suicide information that you provided. There were some graphics, and just for clarification, and I hope that I'm asking this correctly. If not, there may need to be some more clarification, but there was a percentile slide. There was an 82%. And is that the number of those not as likely to consider suicide, that particular slide?
Let me find that slide, the suicide slide. Oh, that does not sound good, does it? The suicide slide. 80.
I think that they referenced 82%.
So let me re-share this. Hold on, see if I've got the right slide. So is it this slide, or was it? Is it this slide?
If Dylan is the one who asked that. So if there could be some clarification, are these the slides that you were talking about? And is there, what was this? If
I think it might have been like a slide or two after that one. It had like pink bar graphs, and it was like, yes, that one.
So now this would be self-harm or suicide, so it would be both. So what this is saying is that, so if we look at this, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Oops. I guess I shouldn't click on it. So if you're looking at, so a person just only does one, maybe this person just plays lottery. What this is showing is that 82% of them said no to both self-harm and or considering suicide. So 17% of them said that they have either considered suicide or have done self-harm. And that would be of the people who, gambled once. Or excuse me, only have one type of gambling. So that one type could just be lottery. And maybe the people that do two types of gambling, it's showing that, 16% of them said that they done self-harm or considered suicide. And as you work your way down, you start seeing where you've got more of it. Instead of things being kind of level, like you're seeing at one type of gambling, two types of gambling, three types of gambling, when you get to 4, 5, 6, you start seeing where there is more of a pattern, the more types of gambling they have. When you look at 6, so if someone participates in 6 different types of gambling, 72% of those that participate in 6 types of gambling said no to both self-harm and considering suicide, but 27%. So, you've got 1 in 4 who are, or just over 1 in 4 who said that they've considered suicide or self-harm.
Thank you, Anne. And then Dylan just followed up with that it's interesting to note that that there's a decrease for yes on the fourth option for 4 types of the.
Yeah, and it could be that actually had a small n with it, because in the 2022 data, you actually found that the 1, 2, and 3, those tended to, if they gambled once, twice, or 3 times, the yes to self-harm was closer to around the 13 to 15%. And then you ended up with 4 being around 17% and 5 around 20% and 6 around 27%. I mean, it was almost like this straight from 4 and above. And this is just 1 year of data. If we combine data, it might be more of a stable number, but Yeah, I thought that. I was like, oh, is that right? Is that? And then I learned it's because the N was just so small on that one, four. It seems like there were quite a few that did one type, two type, or three types, and quite a few that did five or six types of gambling. But when it came to just four, it was a small number, and so that kind of skewed that one item.
Thank you.
But I
And
did
then, oh,
know
go
I thought
ahead.
it was kind of important.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Ann. I did just have another question because I see we're getting close to the end of our hour. We have a coalition coordinator on the line, Megan Gordon from Page Alliance for Community Action, just reaching out to ask if you would be willing to come as a presenter for a future coalition meeting. And if so, I can make that link and connection with you after the training today.
Sure, sure. Myself, we also have through the Virginia Partnership for Gambling or Health, um, someone in your region who could also um, speak in person, and of course, there's somebody with um, who would be a peer. And I thought I can't see any of the things right now when I'm sharing for some reason, but um, oh, wait a minute. Here we go. Chat. I thought there was somebody in here that said maybe they're actually from that region who's a CPRS, um, who can also share information about what we have. But yeah, sure. Myself, Don, who is the state recovery person, any of us, are always happy to try to provide information.
Thank you. And yes, that was Alice from Strengthen Peers. She actually serves that organization serves both in our region, Shenandoah, Page. I think they're moving up into Winchester area, and also Rockingham, Harrisonburg service area. And I believe that Alice leads a support group in our area in addition to being a CPRS. I'm there. We've got 3 minutes left, and I want to honor the time. There are some additional questions, so that if you would like to stay on, we can ask those questions after I give some closing information. But if not, thank you so much for your time. I do want to let you know that in addition to Strengthen Peers, Northwestern has a podcast, Awareness to Action, and our most recent episode of that podcast was with Sam DeMello, who is an individual in recovery with problem gambling and is using technology for gambling support. That is season 4, episode 6. Awareness to Action is with a 2 instead of TO. It's the number 2. And then I did just want to let you know that our next presentation is scheduled for March 26th, I think, March 26th at noon. We will be having Brianna Bonat, who has a master's in public health and is the health policy and data manager at the Virginia Cannabis Control Authority, to talk about laws in Virginia, learn about the state of legalization, the role of the authority in promoting public health and safety. And we'll also be highlighting cannabis-related data recently collected by that organization to help organizations promote cannabis prevention and education. I meant to have this as a link. I'm going to try to throw that out there quickly to you. And for those who'd like to stay on for continued conversation, please do so. And for those who need to go, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And thank you very much to Ann.
Oh, you're very welcome. I did want to say, since you mentioned Sam, we have sponsored his eVive app. I'm assuming he kind of maybe talked about that.
Yes,
possibly.
he did.
Okay.
Yes, he did.
So, which is free for people to use for right now, at least, and it can be used for prevention, treatment, and recovery. So it can help people who choose to gamble do so. And I've got information on it at that. I just posted a link, so you've got that if you need it.
Beautiful. So I'm going to go on into additional questions that came up. One of them was, are there any regulations regarding advertising to youth, specifically as it relates to gaming apps? It seems that, sports betting apps are advertising is all over the place. That was one question that came up.
And they've been trying to get legislation around that piece. There are rules within the Virginia lotteries, since they oversee sports betting and casinos, around some of the advertising, but there really isn't. They haven't done what we would like to see done as far as regulations around that, kind of like what was done for alcohol and tobacco around targeting youth.
Okay, thank you. And then another question came in asking about childhood gaming and adult gambling. If you have information regarding possible links and what to be concerned about.
So some people who grow up in an atmosphere where there is more gaming and gambling, and it's kind of more normalized in there, that the risk for them is greater than somebody who, say, does not grow up in that atmosphere. If you grow up in a family where, you've got your weekly poker nights one day, and maybe you have board games another day, but it's always involving also betting, that becomes like almost an expectation as you get older. And so it puts those people at higher risk of gambling addiction as they get older as well. It's hard to change those community norms and family norms. There's actually, I think it's maybe one of the CPRSs down in the Southwestern region that has a really good story on that. I can't remember what his name is, but it's possible
Thank
Alex
you.
may know. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne. And then finally, there was a question on trend data around problem gambling calls in the state of Virginia. I know at the beginning of that presentation, you showed kind of the history of gambling and that increase in 2020. Have we seen an increase then in what's available for gambling, but also have we seen an increase in calls for support and needing help in the state of Virginia?
Yes, there's been dramatic level of increase. I think since 2019, it's over 900% higher than it was back in 2019, currently in 2024. So, yeah, and it's gone up every year. I mean, it's starting to not go up as at high of a level as it has each year, but it is still, in 2024 was still higher than 2023, which is higher than 2022, et cetera, down the road.
Okay, well, that is all that I received question wise. Are there any other questions online or comments before we say our farewell to Anne and move on with our day? If not, again, thank you, Anne, so very much. This was a great presentation, a lot of good information. Thank you for all who attended, and we look forward to seeing some of you next month at our next presentation.
Thank you.